Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you for joining us. Hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Ciarán Hynes of COSIMO Ventures. Ciarán, thank you for joining us.
No, it's great to be here.
Great. So what was your background before investing in early stage companies? What did you do before this?
Well, I grew up in Ireland. I only moved to Boston actually 8 years ago, but I've always been an entrepreneur. In fact, I started my first company when I was 25 years of age, ended up founding 7 companies, been CEO with 5 of them, had 2 successful exits in that run. Also had a couple of companies that we had to wind up because we just didn't have product market fit or the timing was off. And you learn as much from those experiences, I think, as you do from the ones where you're successful. So as I said, I've been involved in many, many sectors over the years: property, international congress management, and tourism. And then in the last 10 years, I've been focusing a lot on the tech sector. And then what led me to COSIMO Ventures was I met my co-founder, co-managing partner, Robert Frascar. 6 years ago, we worked together on a number of startups. I was involved with 4, he was involved with 4, and we basically worked on each other's companies for a year. And because there was such a chemistry there between us, we worked so well together and got on very well personally. We formed COSIMO Ventures 5 years ago. And that's the kind of, as entrepreneurs, and Rob, again, has an incredible entrepreneurial background, put the first financial services company on the web back in the 90s with Ken Lang, our now CTO, founded a company called Wisewire that invented the tech behind Google AdWords and other technologies as well. So we have very complementary backgrounds, but both very entrepreneurial. And that's what COSIMO Ventures is about. It's about looking at companies from that entrepreneurial background and experience that we have and imparting that knowledge as it's needed to our portfolio.
That's great. So what excites you right now?
Well, we're very much in the deep tech space. We are very, very committed to the whole blockchain technology, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and data analytics. They're the kind of areas that we mainly focus on, and that's what we see where we see the future.
Well, that's great. So for the investors out there, what's your advice for them about investing in the blockchain sector? What should they do before they write that first check?
Well, obviously, as a venture capital fund, we would say invest through a fund and don't try and pick out winners individually yourself. I mean, we have, as I said, we're probably one of the few venture firms with a full-time partner and CTO in Ken Lang, who helps us and the rest of the investment committee make really good decisions across a very diversified portfolio. So that's something that's really difficult. But if somebody does want to go it alone and they want to invest in blockchain, they need to spend a lot of time learning and really digging into the space because it's very new, as we all know, but it's growing very, very fast and it's changing very fast. So keeping yourself educated into what's going on and what the protocols that will be required in the future is critical.
So what's your advice for those startups who are just now beginning to build their first blockchain company? What would you advise them before they go down that path?
I suppose the first thing I would say is make sure that blockchain technology is applicable to your solution or to your business. We see many companies who go down the blockchain route, and it's really something that can be done on a regular database. So blockchain doesn't add any value. So that's the first thing I would say, make sure that it adds value. And I suppose the second thing then is not to forget about the economics of the business just because you're in a very trendy space or using something like blockchain to enhance your platform. Don't forget about the fundamental economics and more importantly, product market fit. We see a lot of companies building technologies on blockchain or using AI. And when you ask them about who the potential customers are or what their business model is, what the feedback from potential customers is, they can't answer that question because they've gone off down a certain route believing that this is what the market is looking for. And then they find out after several editions of the software that they eventually get to something that somebody wants to buy. So I think it's always obviously valuable to keep that in mind.
So you're working in the Web 3.0 space, and how is that industry evolving? What's happening there these days with it?
Well, I think we're big believers that we're looking at probably the single biggest wealth creation opportunity of our lifetime. We think that decentralized trust economy powered by blockchain is much, much bigger than the internet itself. Because as we all know, we've seen everything be decentralized over the last number of years. First of all, decentralization of content, where you could put anything up on the web and anybody could put anything on the web. Then we saw decentralization of commerce, where you could actually buy and sell product. And then in conjunction with that and post that, we saw decentralization of communication. But the one thing that we haven't seen, it was the decentralization of trust. And we've seen a lot of attacks on these honeypots of data and information and money, with attacks on banks, with attacks on companies like Equifax, with hacks into major central data points. And I think the people in general have lost trust in central authorities for that reason. And their identities are being shared across the net without their permission. I think that's a major concern. So we see the next big thing being the decentralization of trust powered by blockchain or technology subsequent to blockchain or building on blockchain.
So what's your investment thesis for investing in the blockchain sector? What's your specific criteria, or what angle are you taking at that sector, which is very large and growing very fast, as you mentioned?
Yeah, we've kind of identified kind of 6 layers that we feel are going to make up the future of the space. One, which I just mentioned actually, is data protection and user privacy. Then you've got platform software and applications, digital assets and cryptocurrencies themselves, RegTech and custodial solutions, identity, authentication services, and then brokerage services and exchanges. So we're kind of focused on those 6 pillars because we believe they're going to be at the very basis of the future of this economy.
Are there any particular startups that fit that thesis, that embody what you're trying to go after as far as making investments into those 6 layers?
Yeah, I mean, we try and identify the leading companies in each of those spaces. Some of them obviously are more advanced than others, but I mean, certainly Civic would fit the identity vertical. We have a company actually we invested in called Gecko Governance that have a RegTech and compliance platform built on blockchain. They're based out of Ireland just by coincidence, but they've also got an office in New York, and they're growing very steadily. And they basically sell their platform to the mutual fund, hedge fund industry and the people who audit and advise those companies. So that's a really good example of a disruptive emerging company in that space. And then we've also invested very heavily. Actually, our biggest investment has been what we believe is the world's first buoyant digital asset or virtual currency optimized for the long-term store value. And that's called NDAU, NDAU, named after the endowment of assets that actually support the currency itself. So I think and again, you have others obviously as well, like Algorand and USD coin in the space. But NDAU is very unique in that it's not a stable coin and it's not Bitcoin and doesn't have that type of volatility. It's somewhere in between. And like I said, we believe it's a true long-term store of value and can be used for many purposes and will be into the future. I suppose in the exchange space, BISC is one of the best and first truly decentralized exchanges. Augur, I suppose you would have to say, is something that we would look at on the platform and software application side. And that's been around for quite a while. Now, I suppose on data protection, we have been looking at Crypti, which is a cybersecurity platform that uses microtokens in place of real data. And so we think they can eliminate hacker incentives with blockchain and cryptography. So those are just some of the kind of companies that we like in each of the different areas.
So we've seen the blockchain space grow very fast and change and evolve very quickly. Today, what do you think are the major challenges for startups in the blockchain space, building those companies with regards to the regulatory aspect, the market, and the technical? What are the challenges they face in each of those?
I think in the blockchain space, I think the lack of really good development talent is still a major challenge. And when you do find good talent, it's really expensive. So that's going to be a challenge for blockchain startups until the computer science and education space catch up. That's certainly probably the biggest challenge that we see. You mentioned regulatory. Obviously, it's an evolving space. We're all looking to see how various countries look at various different currencies or security tokens or utility tokens and how that all falls out in either Europe or here in the US. So operating in that can be a challenge. But I think once you get good legal advice and you work within the current parameters, and we're very familiar with that, I think that's a challenge that can be overcome. But I don't think it's one that should be underestimated by startups in this space.
So if you had to pick one or two subsectors or applications that you think are really good immediate opportunities for investors to pursue in the blockchain space, what one or two would you put at the top of the list?
I think identity services and data privacy, I think, would be the first one that I would mention. We're looking at a number of companies in this space because we think this is something that's absolutely paramount for the reasons I mentioned around trust right at the beginning. Then I suppose the others would be uniquely structured digital assets. That's something else that we would look for as well. But I think the first one, and where we're really focused, other than on obviously something like the virtual currency, is the whole privacy and identity space. And I think that's the area that we're going to look most seriously to next.
Well, great. Well, in the last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't?
Well, I think, the other thing that we didn't talk about was the tokenization of everything and what's going on in general in terms of tokenization. We're seeing everything from art to gold-backed stable coins to silver-backed stable coins to property being tokenized. So we at COSIMO, we actually decided to tokenize our own venture fund. And there's very few venture funds out there that are actually tokenized. And we actually believe we've got the first tokenized venture fund in the world that's evergreen. And so basically what that allows the market greater access to get in, first of all, to the asset class, because if you live outside the US, you can actually invest for a minimum of just $10,000. If you're a accredited investor in the US, it's $250,000. And as we all know, those levels of investment are not enough to get you into most venture funds, traditional venture funds. And then the other piece that tokenization brings is the whole liquidity piece. And there's some really interesting and real liquidity aspects and short-term liquidity aspects to tokenized venture that we're finding our investors, our limited partners are very excited by. And I think, that's something that you're going to see more and more. And we're delighted to be at the forefront of that.
Yeah, tokens bring a lot of value add to the process, and it'd be interesting to see how they pass the regulatory nature that currently controls those, because they keep getting treated like securities rather than currencies or something that is of value like a frequent flyer mile. And it just seems like we're being held back on the regulatory side. Do you see movement on the regulatory side that would change that?
No, well, we're very clear. COSIMO X, our venture fund token, is a security token, and we treat it, as I mentioned there, you have to be an accredited investor to buy any of our tokens here in the US. So we're very clear it is a security. NDAO is very clearly a virtual currency. And yes, like you said, I think it's becoming clearer things like frequent flyer miles or Starbucks points or whatever, if they're tokenized, they're more utilities. And I think that's the way we're going to see it play out. And as I said, we're getting more and more clarity as months and years go on in the space.
Well, that's great. Well, how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
Well, I'm on Twitter at Ciarán Hynes CV. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me very easily there by just searching Ciarán Hynes, COSIMO Ventures. And then we have two websites. One is cosimoventures.com, which is our corporate website. And then any of the above will get to me. So.
Well, great. We'll put those in the show notes. I want to thank you for joining us today and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Great. Thank you very much, Hall.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.